Absolutely. So the next speaker I'd like to introduce is Keith Comito. He's the president of the Lifespan Research Institute, and he'll be talking about how AI and DeSci will illuminate the path of geroscience. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. As many of you know, I am Keith Comito, founder of Lifespan.io and president of the Lifespan Research Institute, a charity focused on accelerating science to extend healthy human lifespan through advocacy, ecosystem building, and direct support of research. I'm also a working group member of several decentralized science organizations and DAOs, such as VitaDAO, Jellyfish, and Gitcoin. And a software architect as well, having worked with several sports and media technology companies, including blockchain companies, to invent various technologies surrounding conversable AI companions and face, body, and voice analysis. For example, for Major League Baseball, HBO, and most recently Disney, as technology lead of advanced research, where I now continue to support as a technology consultant, in addition to my significant role at Lifespan Research Institute. And as it so happens, this last part of my bio, the Disney part, will become unexpectedly relevant to this talk, as my talk here will begin with an unlikely protagonist that you might have seen a version of in a Disney movie. Recognize this guy? Anybody? Yeah, that's right. It's Maui from Disney's Moana. So you're welcome. That's an inside reference. You're probably asking yourself, how is this relevant to AI, DeSci, or extending healthy human lifespan? But I promise you that it is quite relevant if you stick with me a bit. Because what you might not know, as it's only somewhat discussed in the movies, is the story of the demigod Maui lassoing the sun, which is a key legend in Polynesian mythology. Maui, a demigod known for his ingenuity, surveys the land and its people and is saddened by what he sees. The people toil, they struggle, because there just isn't enough time in the day to plant, to harvest, to fish, or to simply enjoy life. And Maui thinks on it and discovers that the problem does not actually lie with the various tasks. It's not an issue with the fish, with the plants, or the laundry. He realizes that the best way to truly solve the myriad problems is to address the root cause of them all. The fact that the sun, that time itself, moves too quickly for his people to have a truly joyous life. The sun is racing across the sky, Maui says. We must catch it and change the way it moves so our days can be longer. I trust the analogy here is already clear. The most effective way to improve the health of a system is addressing the root causes of the problems that arise. In our case, intervening in the aging process itself rather than only its downstream effects and consequent diseases. Another way of saying this, as we know, is that aging is by far the largest risk factor for almost any disease you can think of, be they chronic diseases like cancer, heart disease, or Alzheimer's, or, as the COVID-19 pandemic certainly reminded us, infectious diseases as well. Even things you wouldn't necessarily think of, like car accidents, have aging as a key factor. But despite this fact, historically, government funding bodies do not prioritize this accordingly, choosing to focus on downstream, disease-by-disease funding tranches instead of prioritizing the shared root cause. As an example, the budget of the National Cancer Institute last year was approximately $7.2 billion, whereas the budget of the National Institute on Aging, or the NIA, was only $4.5 billion. And I think this was referenced in an earlier talk. This difference is made more stark by noting that the amount of funding within the NIA that actually goes to addressing the root causes of aging, such as genetic instability, which cause almost all cancers, and many other diseases, is actually much less, approximately only $300 million, with the remainder of the NIA budget actually going to other disease-siloed funding tranches, such as for Alzheimer's. But, thankfully, everyday people do seem to be understanding the importance of this work. Especially over the last decade or so, sentiment has been rapidly changing in favor of aging research, perhaps because knowledge has steadily increased and there is now a growing scientific consensus that age-related damage is a tractable problem that can be addressed like any other. And I'd like to think that this change is at least partly due to the social engagement efforts that we've been helping to lead at the Lifespan Research Institute and its predecessor organizations over the years, which have reached tens of millions of people. through highly visible crowdfunding initiatives that some of you may have supported in the past, our work with YouTube celebrities to reach millions of people with science education videos that we help to produce, which you may have seen if you're a fan of popular channels like Kurs Gesagt or Life-Noggin, or even sometimes working with traditional celebrities, some of which have Disney relevance, like Chris Hemsworth. But even with the recent trend changes, progress is not something to be taken for granted, where once there was not enough voices in the field, now that the field is maturing, there can be so much information that it can be hard to find the signal from the noise. And because of this, the best interests of the people is actually often not acted upon, even despite the vast socioeconomic macro-level effects that could be gained, benefits. So, for example, with an often cited paper from well-known geroscientists and economists projecting that an increase in healthy life expectancy by just 1 year alone could be worth $38 trillion to the U.S. economy. And without clear alignment of priorities, we risk harmful backsliding at the government funding level, which is a challenge I'm sure most of you are quite aware, so I won't dwell on it. And of course, alongside this, challenges in the biotech funding landscape right now. But now is not the time to take the pedal off the gas here, as without proper funding of aging research at every level, gains in health expectancy are not guaranteed. While there have been gains in life expectancy, they're tapering off. And while Ireland here and some other countries are faring a bit better than the US as of late, in all cases, we're not extending our years of good health as much as we need to. And for those desiring to reach longevity escape velocity, for example, it's not just going to happen on its own. And in terms of age-related disease, over 120,000 people still die every single day, over 1 person per second. But on the flip side, this means that any positive shifts regarding what we're talking about here today can be massively impactful. And that is why we have to meet this moment and adopt new paradigms and technologies to not only understand aging, but to understand ourselves and our behaviors so that we can change this number. And here is where we return to the story of Maui, because what he does next after identifying the root cause of his society's problems is to make a critical insight that in order to change something, he must first measure it, and that he needs to enlist the support of his community to change it eventually. This is an apt metaphor for what we must do as a community now to harness the emerging tools at our disposal, AI and DeSci and others, to measure and intervene in the aging process, to act strategically, to break silos, and collaborate effectively to reach our shared goals. And this idea of acting strategically, of identifying and driving projects forward that have outsized tactical value to the fight against age-related disease is core to our revitalized mission at Lifespan Research Institute, which combines the strengths of our past in research and advocacy with the tools of the future, I'll talk about in a second, such as AI and decentralized science, to overcome age-related diseases and extend healthy human lifespan as fast as possible. Specifically, we'll focus on projects that will boldly impact the biology of aging by fundamentally reversing, repairing, or otherwise obviating damage, which builds up in the human body over time. Have the capability for rapid translation with a clear pathway into humans and direct therapeutic relevance. Are uniquely targetable by nonprofits and non-duplicative in the sense of being high leverage but overlooked by traditional funding sources. Are able to catalyze paradigm-shifting step changes in how aging research is done, such as digital biomarkers that some spoke about here already, able to facilitate new indications for age-related decline, or decentralized science approaches, able to expand access to clinical trials and interventions. And/or possessing a unique ability to inspire the public and motivate the world to prioritize aging research. We'll support projects that rank highly across the board on these criteria or that excel exceptionally in a subset of them. And to contextualize this in relation to projects currently in flight in our research labs, work like Dr. Amit Sharma's lab regarding liposomal associated senescence markers, which you'll be hearing more about on a talk on Friday now, I believe, aids in the precision targeting of senescent cells, which can bolster rapid translatability of senolytics and addresses a core mechanism of aging. Whereas the work of Dr. Amutha Bhumanathan's lab, backing up mitochondrial DNA in the cell nucleus, fits squarely into boldly impacting the core biology of aging, and is also high in uniqueness because even though teams elsewhere are working on mitochondrial dysfunction through other approaches like transplantation, allotopic expression of mtDNA will likely be a key piece of the overall puzzle here that needs to get done. And projects like the Mindset, which I've spoken about in the past, utilizing machine learning approaches to facilitate non-invasive and adaptive interventions for dementia, have the ability to catalyze a paradigm shift towards decentralized science and is potentially uniquely inspiring to the public, as if, after decades of work and $1 trillion of US taxpayer funding, for example, yielding little results, if a group of regular people on the internet are able to reverse or even mitigate Alzheimer's at all with things like lights and sounds, it would be an earthquake. And to execute on priorities like this, Dr. Oliver Medvedik and I have stepped into new roles at the Lifespan Research Institute. In addition to our board roles, myself as CEO and Oliver as CSO, respectively, and together with a revitalized scientific advisory board, including Drs. Matt Kaberlin, Irina Comboy, Felipe Sierra, Greg Fay, and others, we'll be working to create new programs that drive forward the types of projects that we just discussed in novel ways. But now, as a window into this, let's focus on the paradigm-shifting advances, because this is where emerging technology approaches of AI and DeSci come squarely into play. Like Maui, first taking the time to meticulously chart the sun's path and analyze the time it takes to cross the sky to know how best to intervene, so too must we have precise and standardized methods of measuring age-related decline that are accurate, responsive to interventions, etc. And here is where AI can actually help in unexpected ways. In addition to drug discovery approaches that I know others are speaking about, AI can be used to create new types of biomarkers. Digital, functional biomarkers, which measure aspects of aging that people directly experience and care about. How do I look? How do I sound? Can I walk? Can I do the things I love to do? As an example, imagine if we had a cheap, fast, and effective way to not only identify the presence of diseases, but deviation between chronological age and biological age as well, purely from non-invasive data that could not only be part of all clinical trials, turning every trial into an aging trial, but available on mobile devices as well. It might seem far-fetched, but is it really that hard to imagine? Human beings do this every day with our own eyes and ears. Ooh, she doesn't sound so good. Oh, that person looks great for their age. Why is it so difficult to imagine that machine learning models can't do the same? Consider voice, for example. Back during the COVID-19 pandemic, I worked on projects surrounding vocal diagnostics of the disease in relation to machine learning work that was coming out of MIT and other organizations at the time, leveraging convolutional neural networks that processed audio of forced coughs gathered in coach lab scenarios, accessing parameters like vocal cord strength, respiratory performance, muscle degradation, sentiment, using spectrogram analysis and techniques such as MFCC, male frequency cepstral coefficients, to output a binary diagnostic, COVID or no COVID. Now, what was surprising is that the voice diagnostics based on approaches like this deployed at the time were providing much more sensitivity for COVID than antigen testing when compared against the ground truth PCR results, even for asymptomatic carriers and also with high specificity. And if you're asking yourself, why would something like this not false positive on a cold? That's because it doesn't have anything to do with phlegm or anything like that. It's because a disease like COVID-19 uniquely affects your neurological system, which changes how your vocal cords vibrate, and this can be detected, which translates to other conditions that affect your system as well, neurological systems such as Alzheimer's disease and advancing age. With related initiatives like the open voice brain model of Harvard and MIT, leveraging speech-based biomarkers to discriminate between healthy individuals and those with dementia, achieving accuracies of over 90% in longitudinal studies. And even just this type of voice technology alone is immensely valuable to society if leveraged properly. When you consider, of the approximately 7 million Americans aged 65 or older with dementia, an estimated 58.7% of them are either undiagnosed or unaware of their diagnosis, because over 97% of primary care physicians do not ask about it during assessments, because, among other reasons, it's awkward to bring it up. Imagine if you just had to speak into their physician's phone for a few seconds and get an early diagnosis, or better yet, if they had an early warning system built into their bathroom mirror or their own mobile phone. And even if such detection would just mitigate the cost of taxpayers by 10%, that would still be $38.4 billion per year in the US, for example. Not to mention the increased ability for family members to make decisions and take assistive steps. And that's just for the voice aspect alone. In addition to audio, Video data is also being used to assist in the creation of machine learning classifiers for conditions such as sarcopenia, cognitive frailty, and heat stress, which intersects with technology already in use by sports and media companies like ESPN and Disney, able to precisely track skeletal positions of UFC fighters, for example, even able to do things like calculate newtons of force transferred in a punch or identify attacks being used. But one of the limitations with approaches like this is that you might either need a complicated network of cameras or a marker system with motion capture suits like with Thanos here, or if using a mobile device, you might have to upload a pre-recorded video to a cloud service and wait for the machine learning to render and post-process, which companies like Move AI do. And in response to such limitations, one of the technologies I've personally invented involves leveraging a combination of machine learning and vector-based approaches to achieve real-time collection of markerless tracking data for hands, face, and body points from a single iPhone, which can not only facilitate entertainment uses, like allowing you to easily turn yourself into whoever you want. Unfortunately, I don't have Maui or Moana here, but I do have Elsa. But also to facilitate the detection of musculoskeletal or psychomotor parameters useful in the early detection of diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or assessment of biological age. And on a different track with computer vision, approaches are also being used to facilitate high-throughput analysis of mobility and lifespan in model organisms like C. elegans, such as what Oral Biomedical is doing with the Million Molecule Challenge, using computer vision together with robotic systems to rapidly analyze the effect of different molecules and compounds. And this itself is another area where improvements in video capture and AI can also augment this. So approaches like this typically do something called multiple blob detection, which can scale very poorly if you have a large amount of individuals that you're tracking. But there are other ways to do this as well that could analyze organisms collectively at the population level, which can still give us types of data that we need for lifespan studies while being able to scale almost infinitely. Oliver, myself, and others actually developed technology in this area some years ago at the Citizen Science Lab GenSpace in New York, which Oliver co-founded. In this case, tracking the motion of populations of paramecia using a combination of computer vision classifiers and data filtering techniques to create interactive games for young students. So not exactly the same use case here, but we've been in talks with various organizations about how this type of technology could potentially augment high-throughput screening of C. elegans, Daphnia, and other organisms. But to return to audio and video data in relation to humans, the goal, of course, is to put all of this together into a truly multimodal data collection and analysis unit that would be able to assess deviation between chronological age and biological age, be responsive to interventions, etc. And which could also be designed, by the way, to collect other types of data while doing this, such as the answer to survey questions or perhaps other tests such as reaction time, vibrotactile sensitivity, and visual perception, which were actually elements of the age meter device we crowdfunded years ago on the recommendation of Dr. George Church. And in clinical scenarios, such a multimodal unit could be more robust and also collect data for blood-based and other biomarkers at the same time, which can be proving to be very important in the days ahead because, as Matt Kaberlin recently noted in a talk, it is unlikely that any one biomarker test alone is going to do the job by itself. What we probably need is everything, everywhere, all at once. And that's why we're excited to see the PROSPER program of ARPA-H move forward, despite a slight DOGE-related hiccup. Because as a key component of this program, which I know some of you are already aware of, is the determining of an intrinsic capacity score, which is basically an assessment that would be able to render that sort of deviation between chronological age and biological age. Essentially an accurate composite biomarker. And a key additional value of initiatives like this is their express goal to bring groups together into teams and to foster interdisciplinary communication and collaboration. And in fact, we're collaborating with a lot of organizations right now on a grant submission to Prosper, combining a lot of these efforts together to measure aging in a truly multimodal manner. And on that same subject, it was good to see the same spirit of collaboration front and center at the X Prize Healthspan Awards in May, which was encouraging winning teams to partner with other teams in subsequent rounds in order to reach their ambitious goals. Because it's going to take a field-wide collaboration to do this. Because in the story of Maui, none of us can do this alone. Like Maui enlisting the members of his community to work together in a network, in this case creating ropes, we too must merge our respective skills and tools to interoperate and mesh with each other, creating new tools and paradigms And this is both true scientifically, such as how the assessing of biomarkers of multiple modalities can facilitate correlations between them, but also the answering of fundamental questions such as how frequently does each biomarker need to be analyzed in order to assure precision and accuracy? Is it beneficial to take a face picture once a day, 10 times a day? How about Horvath clocks, etc.? But also another benefit is in terms of creating new methods of collaboration, such as how Disney has created a co-development structure that allows entertainment-related IP to be leveraged for these purposes, for medical use under the right conditions, which is important because this not only helps to enlist standards organizations like the NIST and the ASTM, which could be potentially useful allies in creating indications for age-related disease, but also because it can tee up collaborations and combinations between different types of technologies, which can strengthen machine learning. For one example, one of the limitations with certain approaches analyzing voice data, such as the approach I mentioned earlier, was that they were based on a specific vocal utterance, a cough, which not only restricts training data to code scenarios, but limits deployment, precludes serendipity because you're kind of building in a hypothesis in your data collection. Oh, it's coughs that matter, right? Where consequently I'd worked with the chief safety officer of Disney on a machine learning scaffolding process of multiple models that can operate on unstructured data, kind of automatically segmenting them to a variety of different phonemes and tracking them all together and analyzing them, which overcomes those previous limitations and allows it to work on ambient speech. A kind of similar example here happens with body pose analysis, where occlusions or any non-standard input can really cause things to mess up, such as when UFC fighters are grappling. So we invented an approach that combines skeletal pose tracking methods with machine learning-based pattern recognizers, so that, for example, if two bodies were coupled in a guard, the gesture recognizer could pass that information to the skeletal pose tracker and allow it to resolve its ambiguities, and vice versa, right? Now, again, obviously, these particular use cases are different than what we might be used to, but you can see how approaches like this, in general, can be used to augment data collection for gait analysis, for example, and allow for moments of temporary problematic data that can be overcome. And of course, one more combinable element in all of this, which is becoming more and more relevant every day, is fully conversable AI companions, which can involve combinations of large language models, Rasa natural language understanding systems, and other systems which create companions that can speak with you as any friend would. And once again, you might ask yourself, how is this relevant? But systems like this can have an important role to play in the collection of data, providing guidance, comfort, and instruction on how to comply with clinical trial protocols, for example. Reaching people emotionally. And that is very important if you want to affect change. I was gratified in the A4LI event in DC to see a slide in Michael Ringel's talk when he was mentioning how public opinion is sort of at the root of everything, and that reminds me of the old quote, with public support, anything is possible, right? Which again is relevant to Maui. As it turns out, the most difficult part of his challenge was not actually the tools and the measurement, etc. It was convincing his community that this would be a good idea. They initially think it's an impossible pipe dream, and he has to win them over with everything here. And again, AI is relevant here as well, and how it can help us to understand social sentiment and how to more effectively shift it in favor of life extension. And that's why I'm excited to announce that Lifespan Research Institute is incubating the Public Longevity Group, or PLG, an exciting new initiative which will combine AI-driven natural language processing, machine learning, sentiment modeling, etc., and open access publishing to deliver timely insights into the societal sentiment regarding our field, predicting emerging narrative risks and opportunities, and helping us to design precision messaging. For example, this will allow us to understand which field-relevant terms are emerging in the cultural lexicon, what broad types of people engage in our field, what marketers will call psychographic profiles, and how these types of people interact with the different terms. Importantly, and how positive and negative sentiment in relation to these categories trends over time in relation to impactful events. Region, demographic parameters such as age, ethnicity, and income level as well. You can imagine how useful this would be to organizations like the Alliance for Longevity Initiatives in efforts such as the recent passage of the Right to Try legislation in Montana, which was interested in expanding safe, regulated access to experimental treatments, which, while successful, encountered some unexpected pushback from different areas, and having a system in place which could assess positive and negative longevity-related narratives and how they're developing in constituencies could allow groups like that to really target their messaging appropriately as well as tailoring it to congresspeople, for example. Another clear value of being able to track sentiment and search interest over time is the ability to more deeply and precisely understand the effect of advocacy initiatives, to see what's working and what's not. For example, you can see in this chart here moments in time where something spiked the search interest for particular psychographic profiles and set a new baseline. But what exactly happened? Was it positive? Is it something we can replicate? And one of the things I'd personally like to see is this data expanded further into the past, to see into 2017, for example, when we launched these videos with Course Gesagt. I'd like to think, as you heard me say earlier, that these videos made a big difference to the public perception of the field, but I don't know that. And a system like this would allow us to close the loop on that. And this could be relevant also for other initiatives like what the National University of Singapore is doing with the HELO surveys, which is assessing awareness and knowledge and motivation in the general population for aging. So what would happen if we worked directly with the top Singaporean YouTubers in a similar way that we did with Course Exact, and saw if that would affect iterations of the HELO survey? And that could allow us to then create a positive feedback loop to move things forward and hopefully unlock government funding. So again, that's why we're going to be supporting this with a crowdfunding initiative, and I'm excited to announce that we do this in the next couple of weeks or months. So building off this successful campaigns that we've done in the past. So basically, we're going to be launching a crowdfunding campaign for this shortly. And if you'd like to be one of the first to support this or be a matching donation sponsor, definitely reach out to me. And I see my time's almost up. So lastly, on the subject of AI, to have a little fun with it, and in an area we probably don't talk about, I want to shine the light on an organization called Jellyfish DAO. That's a decentralized organization that's using generative AI tools like VO to create perhaps whimsical but also thought-provoking pieces to share on social media. For example, the one on the right is from a movie where the director is telling the jellyfish that they need to rejuvenate more because the part calls for a younger jellyfish. And this made me think of this viral trend. I'm not sure if everyone saw this recently over the past couple of weeks of like people making Bible characters as if they were influencers. And it made me wonder if there's something we can do here with literary, mythological, or historical figures who've stood against age-related disease, turning them into influencers. Perhaps those that I had shared in previous talks related to a dynamic NFT series called the Lifespan Legends about such historical and mythological figures. You know, it might be fun to see Elizabeth Bathory as an influencer, the Countess of Blood, inspiration of all vampires. She might have some tips on a new parabiosis-based skincare routine, perhaps, but I'm not sure. Maybe on second thought, she's not the influencer we need right now. But all jokes aside, and I'm wrapping up now, why shouldn't there be something like what we've seen on Super Bowl commercials with like Sloan Kettering or NYU Langone, making the emotional case for addressing the root causes of age-related disease and inspiring the public? Because implicit in the value proposition of life extension advocacy must be that life is good, and we must not forget this and invite people to feel it. Given that the response to large-scale video initiatives that we've done in the past has been very positive, I believe the public is there for this. Because after all, the story has always been with us. The desire to extend life and health to our loved ones from the ancient days of Gilgamesh through to Maui, who lassoed the sun, and onto heroes of the present, who themselves are reimagining of the same stories and dreams. But we want to do more than dream. Once Maui convinced his community, the work still needed to be done, which takes time, proper allocation of resources, and positive sum coordination. That's what we want to be at the Lifespan Research Institute, a force for positive sum coordination and cooperation, working to identify the critical bottlenecks in our field, measure them, and create pathways through them, building an ecosystem to support landmark aging research projects no matter where they are in the pipeline, internal or external, and making the ground fertile for the entire field through education and advocacy initiatives that foster societal change. And to facilitate this, we're launching today a refreshed and unified website at lifespan.io for the organization, which will be a V1 stepping stone to further development towards a true and featureful ecosystem with decentralized science elements, etc., which I'll skip. And we'll also be working with our SAB and the creation of new programs to tie together many of the elements that we discussed earlier, along with, again, DeSci approaches and ways to leverage celebrity involvement that I've spoken about in prior talks, uniting research with advocacy in novel ways to both fund and perform research. But we can't do this by ourselves. And so we created new ways for you to engage in our mission more directly through launching our Revitalized Lifespan Alliance program, which not only consists of a number of ways to recognize support to our work, but creates various opportunities to interact with the different aspects of our work: education, outreach, research, news, our investor network, and advocacy. So if you're interested in this, please feel free to come talk to me, scan this QR code, or find it under the Get Involved section of our website. And the last thing to leave you with regarding Maui is that he succeeds. He saw the plight of his community, identified and measured the root cause of their problems, convinced everyone to build the tools they needed, and then right at the morning horizon, the best moment to intervene, lassoed the sun and gave more time and joy to everyone. And this success was celebrated. It's a good thing. This idea of extending our healthy life on this earth is not a new idea. It's part of a shared human story, and we can indeed prioritize this if we organize properly as a field and work together. And together, we may just one day lasso the sun. Thank you. I think I went right up to the time, so. Any questions?
All right, wonderful talk, Keith. I'm super impressed by your longevity advocate work. I'm doing longevity advocacy myself. What's your sort of business model here? These are like a lot of great programs that you present here. How do you pay the bills and do this amazing work? I want to copy whatever you're doing. Thank you.
So obviously it's always an ongoing challenge in the current environment, right? But I think the way forward here is that, as mentioned, that if you can come up with the right story and the right landmark initiative that can combine research with advocacy in a way that makes people feel engaged, you can start to leverage celebrities, maybe state-level actors, et cetera, to co-sign onto initiatives like this. Because I don't think I'm breaking any news by saying that the spirit of the age right now in certain areas, in the US for sure, there's a bit of a sense of hopelessness in terms of healthcare, right? So I think if you can really speak to that narrative, there are groups and pockets and philanthropists that can care about that. But you have to, of course, hit in all of the above strategy. There's, sort of the big dollars, but then there's also the ability to do small dollar fundraising and build up like a true grassroots movement, right?
Keith, your public longevity group showed some statistics as to when various blips had occurred, when there was surges of interest. Have you any idea what caused these surges, or is it still to be researched?
Yeah, I think...
Because if we knew what it was, then obviously we'd be doing more of it.
Yes, obviously we're still at the early days of that initiative, so we're still kind of mapping the space. But my hunch is that there were certain projects, at least around one of those spikes, things like the Blueprint Initiative and such, that were starting to get into the cultural zeitgeist. But then again, it becomes a more nuanced issue of, it's not always just number go up equal good thing, right? Sometimes you might want to be, well, what kinds of narratives are taking hold? Is this useful to us? Is this particular narrative useful in this sector, but it might hurt in terms of unlocking government funding, et cetera, right? So that's why we need more information, and that's why it's important, I think, that we kind of create community tools like this that could be leveraged by everybody in the community to understand even just some of the basic questions that we've talked about for a long time, like what kind of words should we use, right? Thank you.